Welcome back to Wages and Employment at Wilfrid Laurier University. In our last video, we used our basic labor supply model to think about the income and substitution effects of a wage change on hours worked. Today, we're going to look at how such changes also affect the participation decision. For reference, you should pair this video with readings in Chapter 2 of your textbook. And we're going to start here with our constrained utility maximization problem that we started with last time. The person is being offered the wage rate W1 in the labor market and has a non-labor income equal to YN1. Choosing point A is their optimal choice of consumption and leisure. So we're starting with an interior solution. And then we raise their wage to W2 so that the new potential income constraint is represented by this purple steeper constraint. Looking at the income and substitution effects associated with this change, we illustrated how some people might reduce how much they work if they are offered a higher wage rate. But it's important to point out here, it's impossible to find a higher wage at which this person would actually exit the labor market. To do so, they would have to accept a lower level of utility. And we know the higher wages exceed their reservation wage, which here is represented by that orange dashed line. So the key point here is that the higher wage rates will never take people out of the labor market. But what about someone who starts off as a non-participant? Consider this person with a relatively high valuation of leisure. When the wage rate W1 is being offered in the market, they choose not to work because that wage is lower than their reservation wage, marked here with the orange dashed line. Then we increase the wage rate to W2 and create this steeper potential income constraint. What happens? If, as in this diagram, the new wage rate is higher than the reservation wage, then the individual will join the labor force and work some positive number of hours, which is represented here with the bundle D being chosen. So this is really capturing that substitution effect. Since the person wasn't in the labor force when wages were lower and their hours were zero, the increase in the wage rate doesn't really have an income effect. But by increasing the relative price of leisure, we see people reduce their leisure time and join the labor force when wage rates increase. So now let's turn to what happens when non-labor income increases. And we'll start with the case of a labor market participant. This person had wages W1 being offered, which is higher than their reservation wage, and they choose bundle A with L1 leisure hours. We increase their non-labor income to this higher amount, YN2, which shifts up their potential income constraint. What's really important to notice here first is there is no change in relative prices. The slope of the constraint does not change. Since substitution effects capture only the effect of changing relative prices of leisure and consumption, we know there are no substitution effects associated with an increase in non-labor income. So we are left with the income effect, which will drive an increase in the amount of leisure time, moving us here to point D for this individual. I also want to point out, however, that this person's reservation wage has increased. We'll take this on more rigorously in class, but let's move on to the next slide to see this a bit more clearly. Here, we want to see that unlike wage increases, the increase in non-labor income will increase that reservation wage and could actually work to take a person out of the labor market entirely. Here, I repeat our previous example, but for a person who values leisure time a bit more, so that the case is a bit more obvious. First, we see that same increase in non-labor income, with YN2 being larger than YN1. The reservation wage line moves, looking for that point where a person is exactly indifferent between not working and working even just a little. That point has been shifted up with the new potential income constraint. The new reservation wage is represented by the slope of the higher green dashed line in this diagram. In this case, we see that the wage rate at W1 is no longer higher than this new reservation wage, and this person will leave the labor force, choosing a bundle with leisure time equal to their full-time endowment. Now that we have our basic labor supply model set up, and we see how things change when wages change, in our next video, we will use this to derive our individual's labor supply curve. See you next time.